Hey everyone, my name is Jillian. I am a dual doctoral student in social psychology and cognitive science at Indiana University, Bloomington. Today I'm going to be talking to you about alternative theoretical models. So, these are some different theoretical models that we can use when we're judging morality, when we're judging what's right versus wrong. They're very common models that are used across different disciplines, and I'm excited to get into some of the differences and similarities between them today. So, a little overview of the stuff we're going to be going over. First, I'm going to be talking about the big three philosophical theories. And so, starting with a little bit of philosophy, I won't go too into detail with them, just a little overview of what they are and where they came from. Then, the actual big three, this is a perspective from anthropology, a really cool study that I'm excited to talk about in terms of surveying a small community and starting there when it comes to determining what is important with morality. Then I'm going to go into a social psychological model, which is the morality is cooperation model, suggesting that morality has come to be a way to foster cooperation amongst social groups. Then go into an evolutionary psychology model, the moral foundations theory, then after that, talk about some other frameworks that touch on other disciplines that people commonly use when they're making decisions about right and wrong. And then a final question at the end about moral relativism versus absolutism, especially when it comes to the context of these different models of morality. So to start off, we've got the three Western philosophical theories that are most common when it comes to studying ethics. So first, we've got utilitarianism, which is basically just what provides the greatest overall net happiness for the most amount of people. Consequentialism is a form of utilitarianism, so looking at the consequences of an action, which consequences have the potential to provide the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Then we have deontology, which is a form of morality that focuses on fundamental principles and rights. And so if you think about fundamental rights that all humans you think should possess, maybe all humans have a right to life. And so anything that violates that right to life is morally wrong. Or maybe a personal principle you believe that stealing is wrong all the time, no matter what. There's no situation in which stealing would be okay because fundamentally stealing is wrong. That's kind of along the lines of the ontological theory. And then finally, virtue theory, coined by Aristotle. Basically, doing good means doing virtuous things. So, if you think about, I like to explain it as you go to a public school and you see those big pillars that say kindness, respect, honesty, fairness, those kind of things. Those are all known as virtues. So doing the right thing means doing the thing that is the most respectful thing, the thing that's the most honest, the thing that is the most fair, kind of encapsulating all of these virtues. That's what we want to focus on when it comes to morality. So you can already see here, even in just the philosophical theories, there might be some conflict. Like, let's say the thing that would produce the best consequences, the most happiness for the most number of people, would require somebody to be dishonest. Someone who's a virtue theorist would say, no, like that's not the right thing because you can't be dishonest. That is immoral. Versus someone who's utilitarian that would say, no, if it has the best consequences, the best outcomes that come of this moral situation, even if you have to be dishonest, that is the right thing. So you can see here how if you take three different people in each of these philosophical theories, they may already be conflicting, let alone against these other theories I'm about to talk about from completely different disciplines. So this one is a study that was done with an anthropological methodology, which I really like, and I wish there was more of in moral psychology research. So what Schwader and his researchers did here is they went to this little community in India, and basically they said, what moral transgressions do you face in your life? With which I think is a really cool way to approach it because it's less here's what philosophers and other people, other scholars say about morality, and more like this is how people see morality. This is what people view as right and wrong because that can change across cultures. It can change over time. So taking a true like field work experience methodology here, I think is really, really valuable. And so, from all these different moral transgressions that Schwader was able to collect from the people of this community, he outlined these three basic ethics that kind of include the different violations in the moral transgressions that he identified. So, first of all, he came up with this ethic of autonomy. So, this is stuff that protects individual rights. This would be something that's really popular in Western cultures because we prioritize individual rights, individual freedoms, and autonomy in that way. And so, basically, yeah, it says to protect an individual's will in their pursuit of their own personal preferences. So things that violate that would be things that might be seen as morally wrong in this community. The second one is the ethics of community, which is kind of opposite of the ethics of autonomy, but it would be prioritized more in Eastern cultures that prioritize the collective group over the wants and wills of the individual. So it's all these things that lead up to protecting the society as a whole. Again, we can already see conflict between the two of these because how can we simultaneously respect what every single individual wants while also respecting the general needs of the community? It's hard then to determine what's right versus wrong just between these two spheres. And then finally, he points out this ethic of divinity, which is interesting because this is something that comes up in a lot of research on morality, that people base their morality on their spirituality or religious beliefs, and think that certain moral decisions are wrong because, they violate kind of that personal purity or sanctity or something like that. And this can be applied to non-religious contexts as well, but it's most often seen with some kind of spiritual or religious beliefs. So that was also something that was important to the people in this community. And again, it could be something that's also important to another community. It could be something that another community doesn't value at all. But that is what is really cool, I think, about this research. So I always like to talk about this study and encourage kind of more of an anthropological take on studying morality. Ask the people what they think is right and wrong, and then form your theories based on that. Much more of a bottom up approach rather than starting with the theory and seeing what people think about it. Just kind of a different perspective on making morality frameworks. The next is this idea that's very popular in social psychology. It's called the morality as cooperation model. And basically, what this model says is that morality has become a way to foster cooperation among social groups and minimize the conflict. And so basically, it's a big model for ethic of community, like in Schwader's research. It's what is best for the community as a whole. And it has all these little pieces in it that can be applied to specific moral situations, like your obligations to your family, how that facilitates group cooperation, bravery, and how that helps it. Reciprocity, obviously, is great for community cooperation. And these things are also supposed to minimize the conflict involved in social relationships. So I like this theory, especially because it's the idea that morality is about socialness, that morality has become what's right and what is wrong is what's best for us socially. And it's just kind of interesting to think about that, think about whether we think that that's true or not. Do we think that morality is a social conception of what's best for everybody, or do we think that it's more individual and could be more about what's best for ourselves? Kind of debated. But you can also see how this has some overlaps. I already talked about how it's basically very similar to the ethic of community that Schwader pointed out. But then some of these specific aspects like respect, bravery, fairness, that all plays into virtue theory from Aristotle. All of these would be considered virtues. So there is that overlap as well between philosophical theories as well as social theories. So it's kind of like pick and choose like what you think morality is all about. Do you think it's based in old philosophical ideas? Do you think it's based in the people and what they individually say, like in an anthropology study? Do you think that it's all about being social and what facilitates social cooperation? And here's another one for you. Next, we go into evolutionary theory. Now, this kind of put together by Jonathan Haidt with his moral foundations theory. This is the idea that morality is an evolved concept that's very similar to our biological traits, survival of the fittest kind of ideas of those traits. And so what we see as right and wrong today is based in what our ancestors needed to see as right and wrong in order to provide for offspring and have a successful lineage. So you can see in this chart here how each of them, they have this adaptive challenge. So what the challenge was for our ancestors that made these foundations so crucial. So you see like fairness versus cheating, like you needed to be fair to your in group and not cheat them, because if you cheated them, then they would all turn on you and boom, there goes your lineage. And so we have this evolved sense of fairness. This one's funny. In the current triggers, it says marital fidelity and broken vending machines. So, and I talked in another video on dual process theory about moral foundations theory getting to our moral intuition. So these are about very automatic feelings that we have when it comes to moral situations. So instead of us thinking about, oh, would this be fair? Is it not fair? It's a very automatic kind of system one process to get at that. And so the broken vending machines thing, that's less about like, what do I think about this? Is this morally right and morally wrong? And more of an emotional, like, hey, that's not fair. I put money in. Where's my stack? And we can see how that plays into evolutionary theory, because these would have been kind of baked into our evolutionary systems as we've evolved over time, where it was a very essential aspect of survival to our ancestors. You had to be fair. You could not cheat or else you'd be dead. Whereas now you can cheat and you probably won't die in most scenarios, but you have this intuitive feeling that being fair is the right thing to do, cheating is the wrong thing to do. So that's where this theory comes from. Again, think about whether you believe morality comes from philosophical theories, more social things, evolution. They all kind of, again, they're founded by different ideas, but you can even see here, like fairness we talked about in the morality as cooperation model. We talked about sanctity and degradation when it comes to the ethic of divinity for Schwader's model in the anthropology methodology. And so a lot of these have overlaps of what we think is right and wrong, but they all kind of start with a different foundation. So now you need to ask yourself, where do you think morality came from? What is the point? What is the utility of morality in order to shed light on how we make our moral decisions? One other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to evolutionary theory, because I think this is so interesting and it's not talked about enough, is this idea of Hamilton's rule. That's basically about familial obligation. And we see that also in the morality as cooperation model. That's one of the points of that. So we can see how it can form better social cohesion in communities. But he has this kind of loose math equation, and I'm not big in math, so that it looks scary, but it's not, I promise. Maybe it doesn't look scary to you, but basically R is relatedness, B benefit, C is cost. So the relatedness of you to the person in question times the benefit that you would get from helping somebody needs to outweigh any cost that you might incur by helping them. And so basically it's saying that as genetic relatedness and the benefit increases, so does the chance of it outweighing the cost of helping somebody. So you might be very willing to help your sister's daughter because the relationship is very, very close there, as opposed to your second cousin's mother-in-law's daughter, so that's very far away. But as genetic relatedness increases, so do our moral obligations then to help our family. So I think that this is super interesting because obviously evolutionary theory, it's all about having successful offspring. So you should be, in theory, more willing to help your family than you are someone who is not your family. And this would relate to, like, you're more willing to help your friend than a classmate or just someone you know from playing a sport versus a total stranger. So as the relatedness to you increases, so does your moral obligation to help them. And I think that that's really interesting because it fits right in with that idea of morality evolving from evolutionary psychological theory, like with moral foundations theory. But we don't talk about this enough that, if it's my sister, am I morally obligated to help her all the time because we share half of our moral relatedness? Like, same with my child. Do I have a greater moral obligation to always help my children versus my parents, or my grandparents, because it gets farther and farther. It's less evolutionarily beneficial for me to help them. And I think we have an intuitive sense of that, that we are more willing to help our family members than we are complete strangers. And this could be a great explanation for that, that morality was founded in evolutionary theory. So maybe you think that, maybe you think it's more of a social thing, like morality is cooperation. Maybe you think it's higher level than that. It's not about the people involved, it's about philosophical theory. That's something you get to think about yourself. So some other common frameworks that I just wanted to kind of point out that aren't really like explicit theories that I'm going to outline, but they are very common ways that people make moral decisions. So the first one, obviously, spirituality. Well, a lot of times when people think about morality, it's directly intertwined with religion. But as Western societies, especially the US, gets further and further away from having a core religious foundation, people are saying, oh, the US is less moral than it used to be because, it doesn't have religion. And whether that is true or not to you, that's something that I'm actually really interested in exploring. It is the case that a lot of people equate morality and religion or see them as one and the same, where it's a very helpful, specific code of conduct. Your moral compass is the Bible or the Quran or any kind of religious text where it says, here's my right and here's my wrong. And that is what I go by. It's not based on, deontological theory. It's not based on evolution and what benefited my ancestors. It is based on this religious text and what these religious figures said. And a lot of people base their moral decisions off of that. Similarly, the legal system, a lot of people just believe strictly if it's illegal, it's wrong. If it's legal, it's okay. And it doesn't really matter anything else. And in certain situations, that can lead to a lot of conflict, especially with religion. And so you think about something like abortion, you might believe that if abortion is illegal, then it's wrong. And you should not encourage people to get abortions because it's illegal. Versus if it is legal and you say, okay, abortion is good because it's legal everywhere. Someone who has a strong religious belief that leads them to believe that abortion is wrong would say, it doesn't matter whether it's legal or not. My moral compass says that it's wrong. So again, we see that conflict coming up, that it's not necessarily just about good and bad people believing the wrong or the right things, but more about how we make our moral decisions, what our frameworks are that are guiding us to those final decisions. And then also, I want to point out that just personal experiences have a lot of impact on morality. And more times than not, I would say people don't have a strong, like, I always know what is right and wrong. I always make the same consistent moral decisions throughout my whole life. It might be something in your personal life that leads you to see something in a different way. Let's say that you're a very religious person whose spiritual beliefs say that homosexuality is a sin, and then you have a child and that child turns out to be gay. Then you might go back on your beliefs about homosexuality being a sin because now you have something impactful in your personal life that's changing your opinion. So it's not that, I decided that I'm going with the legal system, whatever is legal is right, whatever illegal is right, forever and always. But instead, we might have things in our personal lives that come up that lead us into different decisions than what we think our personal moral compass is, which makes morality so difficult to study because how do you factor in all of these personal aspects of people and how they make moral decisions? It's hard. But starting with these frameworks is a good place, a good place to start from because it provides you a little bit of an outline and an idea of how different people make different moral decisions. And then finally, one of the big questions here, is morality relative? Is it absolute? None of the above. That's a really hard question, especially when we're trying to do studies to measure morality. I always tell people that when I tell others that I'm a moral psychologist, they always want to know, like, oh, what's my morality? Like, how do I make moral decisions? Am I a good person or a bad person? So I've become really interested in measurements of morality, like the defining issues test or the moral foundations questionnaire, stuff like that. But it's hard to make a measurement like that if morality is relative. If we have one group of people that believes morality is about the ethic of autonomy and another group that believes it's about the ethic of community, and how do we gather all that research together to have one measurement of morality. And I think we see that especially with anthropological studies, which is why I want to encourage that kind of methodology so much, because Schwader just looked at this one little community in India. You think about how that could vary across the whole world. How do we come up with one set of ethics, that describes the whole world? It's very difficult. But a lot of people tend to think that their moral principles are everyone's moral principles, and anyone that doesn't believe what they believe is right and wrong is wrong or a bad person. That's kind of the mindset a lot of people have. But I think we see, especially with things like moral foundations theory, the research and how liberals and conservatives prioritize those different moral foundations. It's not about being good or evil or right or wrong, but about prioritizing different foundations, different frameworks when it comes to making moral decisions. So, personally, I tend to think that morality is relative and that it depends on the situation, it depends on the people involved, depends on the culture that you're dealing with. But I am very interested in proving myself wrong and finding ways to prove moral absolutism. So you think about some virtues like harm. Like, could you think of a scenario that you could ask people all over the world, is this right or wrong? Like kicking a puppy or something like that. And could you find some kind of universal agreement on this is right versus this is wrong? And maybe not even all the time. Maybe if that puppy is like has a little name collar on it that says kick me softly and win $1 million, and you give him a tiny little kick, then is it morally okay? You know what I mean? So not in every single situation, but is there some kind of general consensus that we can get closer to based on values like care or fairness, or things that pop up in a lot of these models between the philosophical, the anthropological, developmental, social, evolutionary psychology? We do see some common threads throughout these frameworks. So, is there any truth to moral absolutism or universality of some moral values that we can all agree on and that can inform how we as humans make moral decisions? We shall see. But yeah, again, if any of this interests you or you want to reach out with questions or anything, here's some of my information. But thank you for listening to this presentation on theoretical measurements of morality.